All right, we are live.
Great, thank you. This is Jonathan Miller, Chairman of Utility, calling to order the meeting for Wednesday, March 3rd. We will begin with a roll call. So I will just call names that I see. So Chris Meekin.
Present.
Here. Clark Wilson.
Present.
Ronald.
Present.
Excellent. And who's on mute that's coming up as Kevin? Is that?
I believe that's Kevin Shell,
Okay.
member of the community.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome. I want to make sure that anyone that I need to include on roll call, but welcome very much. All right, so let's move forward to public comments. Want to open up the floor to anyone who has public comments. Seems like we don't have anyone for public comments. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The first item is discussion and possible action on the minutes, ratifying the minutes from the February 2nd Utility Commission meeting.
So need a motion to approve.
Oh, darn it, Clark.
Yeah, I'll second that one.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Perfect. And that motion passes. Moving on to the regular agenda. And again, this was to some extent a special meeting that was requested after City Council had their meeting last week. And with Ashley's help bringing up an item that is specifically related to some of the hardships faced in the community during the snowstorm that we had recently. So discussion item is a discussion of possible action on the utility bill relief program due to the February 2021 winter weather event, and to make a recommendation to City Council. So again, I'd like to start by thanking Ashley for bringing this up to City Council's attention. I know that Councilwoman Patillo also had some thoughts on this and is helping drive this process. And I'm sure a number of us in the community have been thinking about it as well. So there was some discussion in City Council last week regarding how we can provide some relief to folks, but also around things that we should be considering when looking into potential solutions here. Some things such as what impact would this have on the winter average? What impact, if any, would this have on our commercial customers? And then ultimately, how would we want to proceed with providing folks with potentially some relief, given that there was probably an exorbitant amount of water used in protecting pipes that 2 weeks ago. So I have had some thoughts on this, but certainly want to open it up to the committee, to the commission, to discuss any thoughts that they might have on ways that we can potentially provide some relief. And just before I'll do that, I'll mention that things that were mentioned at City Council meeting were either maybe tier 1 pricing, but I think it came back that tier 1 wouldn't cover the cost, so maybe it needs to be tier 1 and tier 2. There was also, Ashley mentioned that some neighboring towns have done where they'll take the lower of the prior month's usage or the following month's usage. And then other things to take into consideration are administrative burden and whether or not this type of pricing change can be handled by our billing company. So with that, I would open it up to anyone on the commission who has any comments.
Do we know what the magnitude of the problem was in Rollingwood in terms of number of broken pipes and so on?
I don't have data in front of me on broken pipes. I do have a quick analysis. We just got some information from our billing company. If y'all want me to go over that really quick, just
Sure.
kind of our usage between January and February. So looking at our residential side, of our 540 accounts, 282 of them used more in February than they did in January. 100 used the same, and 158 used less. So over half of the residential customers used more in February. Going off of per 1,000 gallons, our highest overage between January to February was 92,000. So there's going to be one that's got a pretty big bill, and there are a few more. The average bill for those who used more in February than they did in January will be an additional 7.9 thousand gallons. So there is a substantial amount of more usage this month than last month. And then for those that use less, it was similar. They ranged from using just 1 gallon less to 61,000 gallons less. So that's for our residential side. In total on residential too, it looks like about 1400,000 gallons. So 14,000 gallons more water was used this month than last month. So about 23% more on our residential side. As far as our commercial side goes, looks like about 48% more water was billed and used in February than January. An average of 61,000 more gallons was charged this month than last month. And 32 of our 71 commercial customers paid more, used more water in February than they did in January. So I hope that provides a little bit of context. Sorry, we couldn't get this data out to you. It has all of the account numbers and things that we haven't been able to scrub yet. So.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. I mean, I think that some of us used more water, and admittedly, I'm one of those users as well. And so I guess the question is anyone opposed to coming up with a way of coming up with something that provides just relief, and it would be across the board. So even the folks, I guess potentially folks that didn't use more water would still receive potentially some relief as well. But is there anyone opposed to the concept of providing some water utility relief as a result of, I would say, hardship? It's not just necessarily leaks, but you had to make that decision of, do I drip water and not experience a leak, or do I not drip water and hope that I don't have a pipe burst? So I think we were all kind of struggling with what to do, since it was, for many of us, the first time that cold weather would cause such a thing. Growing up in the Northeast, we didn't think about those things in the winter. So it just happened and everything kept going as normal. So I just want to make sure if there's anyone that has any actual objections to this, that might be a good place to start. Otherwise, maybe we can start talking about some potential solutions. No.
My one thought is, how does this fit into winter averaging, and can we pull it out?
The winter averaging will not be affected. We did change the policy, but we're still using the previous policy where the 2 highest months were dropped. So this would be one of those months that got dropped if it was high.
Right.
Thank you.
And
I
I
had
think
a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the city council, when I was watching the video earlier, I believe his name was Hal. He mentioned that doing the option where you take last month's water bill would cost the city something from like a programming standpoint. Is that true? Or do we know how much that will cost the city?
That is what he said. I don't believe he provided us a quote, Amber, for anything like that.
I think he came back and said no expense to Rolling Wood to change the rate tiers. So
Yeah, there was definitely some, right. So I guess there was, if we use a previous month's bill, would that result in a fee? But if we just say, when you're billing this month, get rid of your tiers or change the tiers, that wouldn't result in a fee? Is that?
That was my understanding from what he said.
Yeah, that's what he said he was looking into. But he said there will be no expense to Rolling Wood to change the rate tiers.
And then to further that question, I wanted to make sure there was one would be the rate expense through our billing partner, but I also wanted to understand, would there be any burden to the city administration? Is it just we tell them what to do and you guys don't have to deal with a thing? I mean, that's what I want to understand. We don't want to create a new policy or say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do this. And all of a sudden you're sending out 500 mailers that your hand do, something like that. I just want to understand, is there a burden to your team?
Sure. So I think by changing the tiers, I guess temporarily they just plug that into the program and then we send out new bills. Whereas if we do what Ashley has suggested, we can just say blanket, this is what we're going to charge. They're going to do the lower of either month. So I think if I'm understanding, it might be less administrative burden. I just don't understand what changing the tiers. I don't have a good concept of what kind of administration that would require of us. I do understand what it's, that it won't be as much administrative burden to just adjust to the prior month if it's less than this month, if that makes sense. I just don't know enough about what that means to change the tiers.
Would it be cheap to just resend January bills to February? Is that doable?
That's what Ashley had presented, that whichever is lower, you could change, you could pay, if January's bill is lower, you would pay January's bill again for February. I
Yeah.
also think that might be more, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that might be more relief to the customer if we do that, rather than, because if someone has 92,000 gallons of usage, even paying at the lower of the two tiers, that's still a lot. But if you adjust it back to January's usage, then it's a normal, regular water bill.
So one of the concerns that came up during city council was making sure that kind of regardless that the city wasn't necessarily covering the cost of the water, right? So it was, is there a way to say, well, look, you still have to pay for the water like you do if you have a leak, or you're, if you are protesting your bill, you still pay a rate for water. You just don't necessarily pay as much as you would under your normal billing. I think so. The question is, are we okay with a structure that potentially has the city covering the cost of additional water usage, or are we trying to come up with a way that says, hey, you use the water, you still have to pay for the water, you just don't have to pay for it at the rate that you normally would have. And I get it. The 95,000 gallons, yeah, that's a tough one. But at the end of the day, that unless that was, even if that was from a leak, if someone's pool drained out and they had to refill the pool, we'd say, you're still paying for the water, you're just not paying at the highest tiered rate that we have. So I think my only concern would be if we do prior months, we don't know necessarily now the financial impact that would have on the city to cover the cost of the difference of the water.
Let me throw something out there and let everybody throw rocks at it. Wholesale rate for above tier 1, that is administratively doable. But if it's like so much more expensive to try to figure that out, that's the problem. I don't know what happens when we say, hey, let's, I think we can all agree, and I'm going to throw this out there so you can throw rocks at it, that we don't pay more than, or excuse me, the city doesn't lose money, so it's cost. And what does that do to administration of the bills for February?
And Amy, I saw, did you want to add something before?
Oh, I was going to clarify what my understanding was from the council meeting. I think Ron had a good description of it, but maybe just to add some additional context, I don't know if y'all listened to the portion of the meeting where we reviewed the performance of AWR during the event. But the reason that Hal was on the call was actually because there was another agenda item to review their performance, and they chose not to work for 5 days. So I was surprised that Hal was so willing to pipe in and indicate that he had ways that he might charge the city more money to do some administrative work. That was surprising to me. So so the first thing that he did is he piped in and he said that the plan that Ashley had presented, which is the one where we would use a previous month's billing, he indicated there would be a fee from AWR for them to do that. He didn't indicate what kind of fee. Then as the council started discussing other options, that's when I started piping in every time an option was discussed and raising my hand and saying, will there be an additional fee for that? And I don't know if he picked up on my frustration that he had even indicated that after failing our city for a week, failing to provide 24/7 service, that he would suggest that he would charge us additional administrative fees. I don't think, maybe he started picking up on it then, I'm not sure, but the first proposal was just to bill everything at tier 1, and he said there wouldn't be a fee for that. The second proposal was to bill everything, basically to set their formulas so that water would be billed at tier 1 and then anything above that tier 2, and he said there wouldn't be a fee for that, an extra administrative fee. So that's just what I was going to clarify. That's my context. I would be interested to hear if he might have given a different answer after we did their performance review, if he were given the opportunity to discuss what additional administrative fees might happen.
Yeah. Thank you. And just for a point of clarity, the difference between tier 2 pricing and wholesale pricing, do we know? I mean, we know it. Offhand.
So we use the term wholesale pricing. I think people are referring to just like the per 1,000 gallons that we pay to the city of Austin. That amount is $4.65. There are other things that the city is charged for that, roughly brings that amount to about $5.67 per 1,000 gallons. So even the rate 2 is not necessarily fully covering the city's cost, but it's close. And given that those other fees they're just a one-time, like a set fee, it's close.
Well, I guess I would also say we talk about water rates helping to support the water system. There were probably some expenses that are coming out of this for the water system. And so again, I'm open to some amount of relief so long as, again, I think that the majority of the burden of paying for the water still falls on the water user. But I don't think that someone should be penalized for going into higher tiered usage during something like this where they normally don't. Again, that's my thought. And so I was trying to figure out a solution where we can make sure that the city is made whole, but does that also provide an amount of relief that is, that is significant? I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are going to play out to be, but I guess I want to make sure that we're focused on whether or not we're passing a solution that still ultimately costs the city money. And again, our focus has been, at the very least, since I joined the commission, is let's make sure that this water system is paying for itself, and that users are paying for the water system, and not the city, or not our taxes, or not other funds that are designated for other things. So to the extent that we can come up with whatever, one, does not cause AWR to charge us anything, and maybe they won't, even if we came up with something that they thought they would have initially charged us for. It's kind of like, we could come up with anything and you guys are not going to charge us for this right now. I don't care what that is, but come up with something that
There will be charged.
doesn't get a cost to the city to do so, but also provides, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount of relief. I think just the fact that we're thinking about it is important. So whether that's the 567 rate, or that's, if 567 kind of covers the cost, I don't know how many people would not receive any, or potentially worse. I guess if people are not out of tier 2, they could potentially be charged higher? Are we saying anything above tier 2? So I don't want someone who used less water suddenly being charged more because they were only a tier 1 or tier 2 user.
John, you put your finger on the problem, which is how do we administratively figure out how to not burden someone who dripped their faucets so that their house didn't blow, pipes didn't blow, without taxing someone who doesn't use very much or is on well water. And so I think the let's just talk about the available options, and then administratively, whether they work or not. Everybody at 560 1,000 gallons, tier 1, tier 2, last month's bill, current system, and you can complain and then we'll reduce it. I'm out of options.
Right. Well, I think actually if you go with tier 1 and tier 2, so basically you don't go above tier 2. At the end of the day, those are extremely low users. So if someone was a tier 1 user and they happen to go up into tier 2, I still think that is still a fairly small increase in cost for them. I think we're really trying to say those folks that were in tier 2 and went up to the highest levels because of this are the folks that really are looking for some change. And if anyone who's a tier 1 user who went to tier 2 wants to individually reach out and say, hey, we want to kind of challenge our bill, I think we would happily do so. But I think if we just said tier 1 and tier 2, that we'll get the vast majority of users who need relief, and if there's others, they can come out, individually and bring it to the commission's attention. So I guess without any further, I would just make a motion to say that we would recommend tier 1 and tier 2 for the month of February. And then if anyone has any other issues, they can come to us individually, but that would be the motion, assuming again, AWR does not charge us for that. It sounded like he wasn't going to, so no additional charge to city for that. And we still cover, I guess, the majority of the cost of the water.
Council member, what do you think? What's your view? Nobody voted for me. They voted for you.
Oh, well, I think there's a motion on the floor, so I would yield to the chair to.
Well, so how about I'll strike my motion such that you can answer, and then I'll re-motion as necessary.
I think that my impression from listening to the council discussion was that there was more information that probably needed to be gathered still about how to do this. And also that because the Utility Commission has been looking at all of these issues in depth for many years, that the council had time to be able to make sure that the Utility Commission thought through it and provided that feedback that you all would have, that would just help inform the decision and hopefully also give time to gather data. So
Yeah.
I personally, I think some type of relief option that avoids, I would say something that avoids our staff having to do like 100 leak evaluations would probably benefit the city, because it would reduce the administrative burden on our staff of having to process all of those different leak applications and then go through all the different steps that are with that. And it would probably incentivize people to, if there was some sort of relief offered, that would incentivize people to take that relief rather than trying to challenge their leaks. So I don't know if that helps, but I'm looking forward to hearing, honestly, I just am looking forward to hearing what y'all think, because you all have looked at this in way more depth than I have over the last year, especially with the different studies that have happened.
So I think what we need to, if we want to be able to present something back to city council that has kind of empirical data with it, I think that we would need to understand the the financial impact of making this change versus others, right? Where we can say, here is tier 1, tier 2 collects X amount for that month versus the cost to the city for that month. And here is what a wholesale rate would do for that month. Obviously covers the costs to the city. However, there are these many homes that would be impacted by it, and they would need to have a separate bill, right? Folks that actually would have their rate increased potentially by that. And so I guess there's no easy solution. In one solution, we try to make it best for everyone, and we create an administrative burden to find those homes and redo their bills separately. And yet in the other, we're just saying, hey, we're trying to do this across the board as easily as possible, and yet there might be some expense to the city. So long as that is not exorbitant, I still think that that is okay if it provides the relief when and where needed and doesn't create a significant amount of additional work. I just don't know what that number is.
As I'm sitting here kind of thinking through this tier scenario, it also would provide an opportunity. I mean, those homeowners that were without power for a really long time weren't using the water because they couldn't run their dishwasher, they couldn't take a hot shower and things like that. So if you did the tier and just across the board, this is the rate for February, and everybody's going to pay this tier 1 and tier 2 rate. It's relief for everybody. Not just even those who, because I could see where, they might have a lower bill in February, but they may still be paying upper tiers. And if I don't know, that I'm just trying to think through this, and that might be better administratively if it's just a blanket across the board. And if Hal's now changed his tune after the meeting and performance evaluation, it sounds like he's going to set this up for us. So that might make a lot of sense.
And then what was the difference between tier 2 pricing and what it cost the city again for water?
So the tier 2 pricing is $5 per 1,000 gallons. And so we pay City of Austin $4.65 per 1,000, and then we have other fees on top of that. So it works itself out to be about that $5.67 average, just depending on the month. Some of that is based on consumption. So $5 gets us close, right? We're trying not to, price gouge. Or really make money this month. Our effort is more focused on taking care of our customers.
So Amber, tier 1 and tier 2 would put us below cost.
Maybe. Yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
So we did include that base rate. So you pay a base rate plus you pay based on your tier. So that base rate is supposed to then subsidize the difference between like that lowest tier. Those customers are still paying the cost of the water, even if they're in the lowest tier. So effectively what we would end up losing is everything that's you're basically, once you get to tier 2, you've paid the cost of the water. So we're losing like 67 cents, I think is what it would end up with per 1,000 gallons.
So then I just simply ask the question, not advocating the position. Tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Would that put us kind of closer to cost?
That would put us closer to making more money. To Amy's point, we are charging a base fee, so we're probably recouping, if we just do the tier 1 and tier 2, we're probably recouping our costs.
I think you just answered the question.
Yeah.
Jonathan, you want to remotion your motion?
So again, I will make a motion to modify our billing for the month of February to be tier 1 and tier 2 pricing only, in reaction to the storm that we had, to provide some relief to our residents.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
With one caveat, if I may.
Sure.
Significant messaging so that the city doesn't get bombarded with requests for relief. You know, if we're gonna do this, then, you know, let's let everybody know we're doing it.
Of course.
You know, I don't think it can be on the bill, but if we can do it on the website or some other way, so that
We,
we're down with everybody knowing that this is happening, because the point of this is to let people know that they're getting relief so they don't have to ask for more relief.
Amy?
That was the clarification I was going to ask for. Would this be in place of the ability to then come and also request relief for a leak, or would it be people could also come in and request leak relief?
So I guess the question was, if leak relief, you would say your wholesale plus 15%, right?
Right. I
So
think
is that higher pricing anyway?
I think so, but I think it would be just good to clarify. This is the relief.
Yeah, it's higher pricing.
Right. And maybe it just clarifies that, says that this is actually lower pricing than you would get if you were to bring in a challenger bill through normal channels. So
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Wonderful.
will we have a report on the financial impact perhaps at our next meeting?
We will work on getting that for you.
Okay.
Yes.
This is part of the rainy day fund that I thought we were kind of working towards, and this might have been something that we could have tapped into. Sort of, you know, we got out of we're always in the red, now in the black, and then we have a rainy day fund and.
Well, thank you for everyone joining on somewhat short notice. Also in support of our community here to try to do some good coming out of what was certainly a unique experience for some of us. So appreciate everyone's time. We have no other agenda items. So with that, I would move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Unless anyone has, oh, perfect. Second. All in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
Passes
All right.
as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank y'all.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
Everyone.
Have a good
Good
evening.
work.
Bye.